Good evening, everybody. We'll begin on page 300. Expecting severe thunderstorms in the following counties: Cook County, DuPage County. Kerry hit the button on the radio again, this time harder. She had been trying to find a station with some soft classical music for Connor, but after turning the volume down to 1 and scrolling through countless hard rock, alternative, pop songs, and news channels, she gave up. There was nothing relaxing on the radio. She turned it off. She put the silenced box down on the stand next to Connor's bed and got up, walking over to the window. They were in a private room now, with an FBI-appointed guard outside the door. Kerry sighed, closing her eyes as she leaned against the window frame and listened to the torrential downpours. She had no raincoat or umbrella with her. Kerry? Kerry's eyes shot open and she turned around, rushing back to Connor's side. "Never left," she said with a smile, taking his hand. "I was just listening to the rain." He smiled back and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he said, "I had a dream. You might be interested." "Oh?" "I think it was closer to a memory." "That's good! That's a great sign so soon," she said encouragingly and sat on the side of the bed. It's like someone took out a scene from a movie and planted it in my head. I can't believe it actually happened." She nodded. "I know," she said ruefully. "I had just..." He chuckled, as if what he was about to say was part of a sick joke. "I had just killed Janet." It took her by surprise. She wasn't expecting him to bring up the book. She wasn't sure if he even remembered the book. She smiled, though. "Finally decided, huh?" "Yeah. Henry went in the tomb, and he wants to turn back." He paused for a moment, closing his eyes again. He was so exhausted. "But he can't. He realizes that." She nodded. This was excellent. He remembered his plot. "She was hit by the energy beam that opens the tomb. It was the only way they could gain entrance. She didn't suffer, but that doesn't make it any easier on Henry." "Of course not," she said, still smiling. She was starting to see the parallels in this book and her own life, except for the fact that Janet needed to die for the tomb to open and for Henry to save the world. "That's when he came in." "Who?" Kerry asked, confused as to whether he was still talking about the book or about the memory. "Technical specialist Dan something or other. He had an ID badge." Kerry looked at him sympathetically. She knew she wasn't going to like what she heard next, especially now that she knew Connor was reliving it in his sleep. "What did he say?" "He said he excuses the intrusion, but he has a warrant to confiscate my computer and take me to the local police station." "What did you say?" she asked him softly. "I asked him kindly why the hell he had entered my house without ringing the doorbell. I knew the door was locked, and I knew a technical specialist didn't carry a gun. The warrant didn't look legit either. He brought his hand up to rub his eyes, but stopped when he realized a pulse ox monitor on his index finger and a splint on his pinky finger were stopping him from doing so. He lowered his hand. Anyway, don't you want to write this down? I can get an official statement later, she told him, when you remember all of it. Even as she said it, she realized he was right, but she didn't want to interrupt him. Fine by me, he said. He looked at his hand again. Why's my finger broken? Carrie sighed. I honestly don't know. I'm sure you'll remember it at some point. Not that it'll be pleasant. She said the last with a hint of bitterness. He nodded. Ain't that the truth, he whispered. What happened after he handed you the warrant? I told him to get out of my house. I knew he was a fraud. I threatened him. She nodded slowly. He tried to reason with me, but I saw his hand move toward that gun. I wasn't going to take any chances. I pressed the panic button and hit him. I might have broken his nose. He paused, and she didn't take her eyes from his. He looked distant, as if he was trying desperately to remember the rest, but just couldn't. He sighed in frustration. I'm sorry. That's all I can remember. That's where it ends. She nodded. It's okay, she said to him, squeezing his hand. You'll remember the rest. And we already know what happened, so you can take your time. He accepted this with a somewhat reluctant nod. Then he closed his eyes again. He didn't want to fall asleep. He had some questions for her. He just rested his eyes for a moment and opened them again. Anything happen between the last time I was awake and now? About the case, I mean. Sort of, she said. It's nothing to report, really. Nothing for you to worry about. How are the kids? Safe, she reassured him with a smile. I hope, she thought. With Neil? She looked at her watch. They should be, yeah. He looked confused. Where else would they be? Well, Mom and Dad will be here soon, she told him. And the FBI's coming in now. And they should actually be here and at the house soon. I thought you said there were no developments. Why are they taking over? Just a little extra security, she said. She hated playing dodgeball with him, but she didn't want to worry him with the information that their kids were just attacked by trained assassins. Gang members and evil geniuses were bad enough. Now they had to deal with assassins? It was starting to sound like a comic book, Kiri thought bitterly. And he wasn't buying what she said. Something happened, and I deserve to know what. Not now, honey. Not before I know more, okay? Just trust me. Everything's under control. He frowned and said, I do trust you. I just want to know what's happening. As soon as you know more? She nodded. I'll let you know what's going on. Okay, he said softly, and closed his eyes again. He didn't get to fall back asleep before 2 FBI agents walked in, one wearing a black suit and one wearing a gray suit. Both wore FBI badges. They immediately showed their IDs. Agent Castile, ma'am. Agent Jeffries. Kiri O'Malley, she introduced herself, shaking both of their hands. This is my husband, Connor. Sir, they greeted simultaneously. Pleasure to meet you. Nice weather we've been having, Connor said with a small smile. It's been lovely, Castile said sarcastically. His dark brown hair was soaking wet. Kerry wondered how Jeffries managed to keep his dirty blonde hair completely dry, not seeing any obvious signs of a raincoat or umbrella. We've been appointed to secure the inside of the room. The hospital's being secured as we speak, Jeffries said. We've spoken to the hospital about the urgency of the matter. Perfect, Kerry said with a nod. Were you told anything about when my parents were arriving? Just that they're being picked up when they land and taken right here. Good, she said. I'll let them stay with Connor for a little while, and I'll go back to my house to talk with Neil. Were you told anything about that situation? Minimal information. We're mainly here just to stay with Mr. O'Malley, Jeffries told her. That and make sure you're safe, ma'am. She nodded. All right, well, I'm leaving in a little while, but I'm coming back. And I'm told I'm being escorted to my house? Right, Castile confirmed with a nod. Agent Jorge's driving. Okay, Kerry said in a concluding tone. We'll wait for my parents then. She looked at her watch and resumed sitting near Connor. He had been mostly quiet during that conversation, leaving Kerry to arrange whatever she wanted to. When should Mum and Dad be in? Sometime soon, Kerry said. They probably landed a while ago. I never did get their exact flight time. The FBI agent spent the next half hour securing the room. Connor fell asleep, and Kerry sat in silence by his side, her eyes shifting back and forth as she watched the agents, and then looked back at her husband. Kerry got a call from an Agent Kim, who said he was on his way, hovering with her parents in his car. Roughly 15 minutes after that, the door opened, revealing Seamus and Kathleen Dunnigan. Both Seamus and Kathleen were short and averagely built. Seamus had stopped the active dye in his hair about 10 years ago, because a man his age with red hair looked awfully conspicuous. But Kathleen had kept the dye, enjoying the fact that her very light, blondish red hair came in that way, instead of white. They both wore golf shirts and khaki pants, and both sported watches on their left hands. What was assumed about spouses looking more like each other as they aged was apparently true. Kerry, her mother said softly, and Kerry walked up to her, smiling ever so slightly. They embraced in a group hug while Agent Kim attempted to be inconspicuous. How is he? Seamus asked her quietly, peering into the room. Neil told us he was going to make it. Kerry nodded. He is. He's sleeping right now, and he's got a long road ahead of him, but he's going to make it. Oh, thank God, Kathleen said in relief. Can we see him? Seamus asked. Of course. His speech. It's a little slow. He has a traumatic brain injury. The nanites are still repairing the damage, Kerry said, stepping aside so the small group could enter the room. The FBI agents seemed to relax a bit after the door was closed. As soon as Kathleen saw Connor, she rushed to his side, stifling a gasp. Seamus stood with his daughter. He put his arm around her and led her back over to Connor's bed, his face grim, but his eyes sympathetic. Oh, my baby, look at you, Kathleen said softly, taking Connor's hand. There were tears in her eyes. Connor awoke at Kathleen's touch and waited till his vision cleared to say anything. He smiled at his mother-in-law. Mum, he greeted, ever conscious of how weak his voice sounded. Connor, she let go of his hand and gave him a gentle hug. Oh, it's such a relief to know Kerry found you. When Kathleen released him from the hug, Connor said quietly, I know. He looked at Seamus, holding Kerry by her shoulders. Dad, how are you? I'm fine, he answered quickly. How are you feeling? Never better, Connor responded sarcastically. That earned another hug from Kathleen, and Connor smiled. Mum, thanks, but my ribs are kind of sore, he told her. Oh, I'm so sorry, she said instantly, retracting her body from his. Are you okay? Well, of course you're not okay. He chuckled. It's all right, he said. He understood why she was so nervous, but that didn't mean it wasn't slightly amusing. He had no doubt the fussing would get on his nerves after a while, though. Probably when the drugs wore off. Kerry smiled and said, I'll go grab a couple of chairs from over there. She left to do so, and Connor noticed the FBI shifting positions accordingly. I take it you're wondering why we're guarded, Connor said to his in-laws. We understand, Seamus said. He took his wife's hand and squeezed it gently. And we don't care, as long as we can spend some time with you. Connor smiled in response. Kerry returned with the extra chairs and positioned them next to Connor's bed. Here you go, she said to her parents, and sat down in the spot she had assumed before. Seamus and Kathleen sat down as well, not taking their eyes from Connor. I heard I was going to get an earful from you, Dad, Connor said with a mischievous smile. That you are, my boy, Seamus responded in a mock-angry tone. You have no business going off and scaring my daughter like that. If I had known you were going to be a troublemaker, I would have never allowed you to marry her. Kerry laughed. I'm sorry for being such a bother, Connor responded, still smiling. Don't you interrupt me when I'm talking to you, Seamus said, the grin on his face growing as he attempted to be lighthearted at a time when he certainly didn't feel like it. He patted the side of the bed and sat back, done with his little acting bit. How long are you two here? Connor asked them. As long as you and Kerry need us. We'll stay after Neil goes back to work, Kathleen said. Connor nodded slowly. We appreciate it, he said. We definitely do, Kerry agreed. Don't even think of it. There's not a chance I could get your mother to stay in the house while you two had to handle all this, Seamus told them. And you both know she wants to adopt your children anyway. Oh, stop, Kathleen said with a smile. It's true, Seamus argued. Kathleen rolled her eyes. When can we see the kids? She asked Kerry. Tonight for sure. I actually need a favor. Would you two be willing to stay here while I run back home for a little bit? See the kids, talk to Neil, you know. Of course, Seamus and Kathleen answered simultaneously. Kerry smiled. Perfect, she said. Well, I'll get over there then. She gave Connor a kiss on his cheek and said, I'll be back soon. I'll be here, Connor told her with a small smile. Love you, honey. See you in a little while, Kathleen said to Kerry as she walked toward the door. Be careful, Seamus added. Agent Kim stopped her and said, I'll escort you to Agent Jorge's car. Kerry nodded. She looked back at her parents and Connor and smiled at them before she walked out the door. Kerry's parents turned to Connor as soon as the door shut. Honey, if you'd like to sleep, don't stay awake because we're here. There will be plenty of time to talk, Kathleen told him. It's okay, Mum, said Connor. In truth, he was quite tired, but he didn't want to sleep again. Not in the first few minutes of seeing his in-laws. Is there anything we can get you? Seamus asked. No, I'm okay right now. The morphine's meeting all my immediate needs, he said, and his eyes drooped slightly. So you're not in much pain? Kathleen asked him gently. Connor sighed. Not right now, no. I can't wait till I don't need the morphine anymore. That'll be a blast. We'll be right here with you, son, Seamus told him. We're not going anywhere. He nodded, very grateful for their support. Thanks, he said, and closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he asked, Has anyone heard a weather report? Sounds like a tsunami out there. It's a huge storm, Seamus agreed. Encompasses most of the Midwestern and Eastern parts of North America, Kathleen informed. It's a wonder we could land in it. Any predictions of tornadoes or anything? All over the place. We'll just have to turn the television on or pull out our phones and find out if we're under a warning or a watch of some kind, Kathleen said. Just then, a huge lightning bolt lit up the dark afternoon sky. It almost looked like evening outside. Seconds later, a boom shook the hospital windows. It's right over us. Hope we don't lose power, Seamus said. The hospitals have backup generators, so don't worry, I'm staying alive, Connor told them in a slightly joking tone. That wasn't what I meant. Not that I wouldn't rather you stay alive, Seamus said, smiling at Connor and then at his wife. She didn't find that at all funny. I was referring to your house. The kids won't be able to distract themselves without power, and they need to distract themselves right now. Connor nodded. Yeah, he said, suddenly sounding guilty. I miss them. I'll bet you do, Kathleen said sympathetically, taking his hand. But it's better they don't see you yet, honey. I agree, Connor told her. But still. He hated to put his family through this. It wasn't as if he had asked to be nearly killed, but it was still his condition that was making them so nervous. I know, Kathleen softly said. And you'll get to see them soon. It's all going to be all right. Connor nodded. It will, he said. I'll see if I can't be 100% in 6 months. And then we can all go over to Ireland and spend the kids' spring break together. You can come sooner than that, Seamus told him. You always have a place with us, even if we've got to wait on you. You know that. No matter what condition you're in, 0.1% or 100%, Kathleen added. Smiling, Connor said, Then we'll have to come stay sooner than spring break. Aiden wouldn't deal with Christmas elsewhere very well, but their breaks are long. We've got at least 2 weeks. We could come then. Or sooner, or later. We don't have to set a date, Connor, Seamus said. Seriously, just relax. We'll leave Kathy to figure out the logistics. Thanks, Kathleen said sarcastically. Connor closed his eyes again, feeling a wave of exhaustion hit him. He had been up longer than he was comfortable with right now. Why don't you go to sleep, honey, Kathleen said. We'll be right here when you wake up. Connor nodded, not opening his eyes again. Kathleen and Seamus sat back, and Seamus took his wife's hand as they sat in silence by Connor's side. We'll read more tomorrow.